In August 2024, China quietly flipped a switch. No press conference, no headlines on the nightly news. They announced export restrictions on a metal most Americans have never even heard of. By December of that same year, they escalated to an outright ban, specifically targeting U.S. military users. That metal is antimony. And if you've never heard of it, that's the problem. Antimony is inside every primer you've ever pulled a trigger on. It's in the lead alloy that makes your bullets hard enough to actually function. And without it, you don't have ammo. You have expensive paperweights. Here's what happened after China hit that switch. Antimony prices went from $1,400 per metric ton in July 2024 to $38,000 per metric ton by September, a 2,600% price surge. The sharpest rally ever recorded since price tracking began in the 1980s. And the civilian ammo market is sitting directly downstream of that explosion. So ask yourself, do you know what's inside your primer? Because whoever controls that ingredient controls your ability to defend yourself. And right now, that's Beijing. I know what you're thinking. That's a military problem. I'll just buy off the shelf. I hear you, but stay with me for 60 seconds, because this hits your wallet and your front door directly. Your primer, that tiny copper cup at the base of every single cartridge you fire, is roughly 10% antimony sulfide by composition. It's the fuel that sparks the powder charge. No primer, no ignition. No ignition, no shot. It's that simple. Here's what the price spike already did to you. One gun shop owner in Washington State reported his cost for bullets, lead, and primers shot up by as much as 150% in a single shipping cycle. The average price of a single round of 9mm ball ammo topped 35 cents in January of 26, the highest since 2023, up 10 cents from the year before. Multiply that by the thousands of rounds you run through in a training year and you're looking at real money. And it's not stabilizing, it's getting worse. The price data is already baked into what you're paying at the counter, but the reasons behind it go deeper than a tariff or a trade spat. And once you understand the full picture, you'll realize this problem was built over decades, not months. To be fair, the most compelling argument from the ammo industry sounds reasonable. Supply chains adapt, prices spike, and then they correct. We saw it after 2020, we saw it after 2022, and the market normalized both times. The logic behind that position is sound. Markets do find alternatives. Manufacturers do qualify new suppliers. And prices do eventually come down. You could also make the case that the U.S. Army is already on it. In 2023, the Pentagon launched a $22.4 million effort through the Defense Ordnance Technology Consortium, specifically to develop a domestic process for producing military-grade antimony sulfide from raw ore. The Army says that refining process is expected to be operational by 2026. On top of that, a $59.3 million investment through the Defense Production Act went to Perpetua Resources to advance an Idaho mine that could eventually produce domestic antimony. That's the steel man, and honestly, it's not nothing. However, what they aren't telling you is how long eventually actually takes. Mines don't open up on a press release schedule. And every dollar of that government solution goes to military supply first. You're not in that line. You never were. So let's get into the specifics, because this story is more alarming the deeper you go. Most gun owners know about lead in bullets. Most don't know that pure lead is too soft to function reliably in a modern cartridge. It deforms, it strips the rifling. It doesn't hold its shape under pressure. Antimony is what hardens that lead alloy, hardening it to specific ballistic performance standard your firearm was designed around. Pull that ingredient and bullet quality degrades. Primer reliability degrades with it. Inside your primer, antimony sulfide serves as a fuel and friction sensitizer in the compound, part of a formulation that's been standard since the 1930s. lead styphnate as the explosive, barium nitrate as the oxidizer, and antimony sulfide as the fuel. It's not a redundant component, it's structural. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China accounts for 48% of global antimony production and supplied 63% of all U.S. antimony imports. In August 2024, they announced export restrictions. By December 3rd of 2024, China issued an outright prohibition on antimony exports to U.S. military users, with a broader, in-principle ban on exports to the United States entirely. Chinese antimony exports fell by approximately 97% after those restrictions hit. Global prices for antimony trioxide roughly doubled just on that announcement. By early 2025, the price per metric ton reached $51,500, and some Rotterdam market reports show prices climbing as high as $57,000 to $60,000 per metric ton. The United States needs 30,000 to 40,000 tons of antimony per year. Domestic production sits under 1,000 tons. We recycle 18% of demand from lead-acid batteries. The rest has been imported, mostly from China. Antimony appears in more than 300 U.S. weapons systems. The Army called it one of the most defense-critical minerals with no domestic supply chain. Primers are already the tightest link in the civilian ammo supply chain. Fewer manufacturers, specialized chemistry, hazardous material permits, and tightly controlled raw inputs. None of that scales quickly. When antimony gets scarce, primer output slows. And when primer slows, it doesn't matter how much brass, powder, or bullets are on the warehouse shelf. The round doesn't get built. And that brings us to the question nobody in mainstream gun media wants to answer. How the hell did we end up here? Here's where the conservative libertarian lens cuts clean. The United States stopped mining antimony in 2001. That wasn't a market failure. It was a policy environment that made domestic extraction uneconomical through regulation, permitting timelines measured in decades, and the unchallenged assumption that global free trade would always deliver cheap inputs. That's the government picking winners by default. And the loser, in this case, is American manufacturing independence. Now that same government that let domestic mining collapse is spending tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to rebuild what we already had, and funneling the output straight to military contracts. Civilian shooters are not in the beneficiary column. They're in the wait-and-see column. Meanwhile, establishment Republicans who've championed free trade agreements for 30 years share direct responsibility for the supply chain dependency that made this possible. This is not a Democrat-only problem. It's a bipartisan policy failure dressed up in national security language after the fact. The non-aggression principle is clear. You don't have the right to tell someone that they can't defend themselves. But when government policy quietly engineers the conditions where self-defense becomes unaffordable through mining restrictions, trade agreements, and military procurement priority, the effect is identical to a ban, just slower and quieter. Your Second Amendment right is only as durable as the supply chain that feeds it. If that hit home, subscribe right now. This is a kind of analysis that doesn't make the hunting magazine headlines, and we cover it every single week. Follow the if-then logic here, grounded in what's already documented. If antimony prices stay elevated and the China ban holds through 2026 and beyond, primer input costs don't normalize. Manufacturers absorb what they can, then they pass the rest on to you. A 10-cent per round increase on 9mm doesn't sound catastrophic until you're buying 1,000 rounds for training and your cost just went up $100 on a single purchase. If no alternative supplier base comes online fast enough, and right now there isn't one, civilian primer production tightens further over the next 1 to 3 years. Not a cliff, a slow squeeze, the kind that happens before you notice it in the news. And if no serious domestic mining infrastructure comes online before the next demand shock, election year panic, a geopolitical flashpoint, or a major civil unrest event, the system breaks fast. Primers go first. Then the rounds build around them. The gun on your nightstand becomes a very expensive club. This is a slow burn with a hard stop at the end. The timeline is already running. First, if you reload, prioritize your primer inventory right now. Primers are the one component you cannot substitute or improvise. Stock what you shoot. Do it before the next wave of price increases works through the supply chain. Second, if you don't reload, start paying attention to primer availability as a leading indicator for ammo prices and supply. When primers go scarce at retail, factory-loaded ammo follows within weeks. That's your early warning system. Third, support domestic ammo manufacturers and push your representatives to fast-track mining permits for strategic minerals. Not because government is a solution, it isn't, but because the regulatory barrier is man-made and reversible. Contact your rep and tell them the Perpetua, Idaho mine needs to move faster. That's a direct, specific action that puts pressure where it belongs. Share this video with one person in your circle who's never thought about what's inside a primer. They carry every day and have no idea this problem exists. And if you want the full breakdown, sources, data, and the week's top supply chain moves, sign up over at shesright1776.com. That newsletter goes deeper than this channel can. Subscribe and share. Because an unarmed citizenry doesn't always happen at the barrel of a gun. Sometimes it happens at a supply chain choke point, and Beijing just found ours.